This is Martha Ayers.
This is Dale Melcher.
And so, can you all start by sharing what your connection is or was with the women's studies programs, and in sharing that maybe sort of the years attached to it.
Okay, I'm going to start. Arlene hired me in 1974 to work part-time for the program, setting up an internship program and then running the program. So that was 1974, and I was there until 1986, more or less.
And currently, what's your relationship with the program now?
I still work on campus. I work at the Labor Center, and among other things, I teach a course on women in work. So I get a lot of women's studies students in that course. And I come into the intro class and do a lecture on women in work and whatever.
Great.
So you began?
So I began. So, let's see, 1973, I met Arlene Avakian, and women's studies was just getting started, and I'm a psychotherapist, and so there was a whole group in the Every Woman Center of psychologists in the area that were meeting to redefine women in psychology and how we look at our inner world from a feminist perspective. So it was a whole different thing. So I met Arlene, and we got together. We've been together 35 years, and so 36 years. So therefore, I'm still connected to the program.
So if you could think of, I'm sure you have multiple fond memories, but one sort of memory as it relates to your connection or your time at women's studies, or your current sort of relationship with women's studies.
I remember the first office we had, which was an upgrade from being out in the hallway. So we were in a room in Goodell, right next to Every Woman Center, a room where I now go for meetings. It has a big conference table with a bunch of chairs around it, fills up the whole room. We had, 5, 6, 7 desks in this room. And this was Women's Studies Central. So we had Kathy Portuguese, the director. We had Arlene. I had my desk. We had a couple of graduate students. We had Mary Ford, who went on to become mayor of Northampton. She was a grad student in sociology. And we ran the program out of this little room, advising students, setting up various aspects of the program. I remember we used to talk about how little time it took for us all to have our periods at the same time, because we were all, I should say that on camera, right? We were like a single organism.
It was that small.
It was that small. Arlene and I literally worked about 2 feet from each other for years, and it wasn't that much better when we moved into Bartlett.
It wasn't that much better.
No.
It's still small.
Yep.
It's still kind of small. You can only get so much space.
So what about
Yeah.
you, dear?
Sometimes before the door came in, and you all were working without a door, the psychologists would meet, and a bunch of us would go into women's studies and sit at all those desks and, have discussions. So that room was used sometimes multiple times because it was attached to the Every Woman Center.
Right.
So before you got the door, that was before the door. Or maybe it was the door came, but anyway, it was great. And I'm in an unusual situation because I was not a part of the program, but I did teach for women's studies. I taught psychology of women several summers, and that was a great thing to do. So that in that way, I was a part of it.
So just to get clarity, so you said you were a psychologist, particularly a psychotherapist, and so you worked at the Every Women's Center, and so how you connected to women's studies was through the relationship between the Every Women's Center and
We had a group of women psychologists. We were all in private practice, actually. Well, some of them worked for Hampshire. I worked various ways. But we would meet at the Every Woman Center. It became central to our development. And some of the information that we got out of that time, became the literature of the day. I mean, there was a Boston Women's Collective that did that, and so there was great literature that came out of those meetings together. We were redefining. It was not going to be a male world, and that's what our work was.
So the other thing I remember is that my job, I got hired because I was an activist, because I was working at the Women's Center in Northampton. And the idea was from the get-go that there would be a required internship component to the degree that, what was talked about at the panel today about the balance between theory and practice. So I was involved in setting up these internships, going out in the community and trying to find things, and then advising students and trying to match them, and supervising the internships. And I remember how we had to fight for that as a part of the program to maintain it. Though there was a point in the 70s where there was an office of internships, and where internships were accepted, but still just this idea that students needed to have some hands-on practice, and then to find that, to find in the community opportunities for young women to put into practice what they were learning in the classroom. And I just remember just so many aha moments. Students coming in and saying, I get it. I had to go visit a family, where the woman was on AFDC, and, I get how constrained her choices were. And, it's what makes you get up in the morning and go to work, right? The immediacy of this.
Seems really powerful.
Yep.
So, you all were there at the beginning when women's studies was women's studies. So, what do you all think of this change in the name? This shift to the women, gender, and sexuality program from the women's studies?
I think Arlene spoke about that quite nicely today, where you're coming to a new place in women's studies, and this brings in everything that you're going to be discussing. So it's new. I think it has to be. I personally miss women's studies, and it'll never be that. But
It's really a long time to say. I agree with Martha. I think it's about an evolution of a discipline, and we couldn't have started there.
no. Oh my goodness, we didn't even know
It was
where to
really
start
hard
there.
to start with women's studies. I can remember so many conversations about why isn't there men's studies, and we would say, there is. It's called the university.
That's right. That was a big deal.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
It's really, this is another thing.
It's just having to defend the discipline.
Retirement studies is the next thing.
And I was saying, I was thinking about all the books that are published now, and I remembered when you could put the canon, if that's what you wanted to call it, on one large bookshelf. Those were all the books that you needed to read. Well, you clearly can't do that now.
No. I mean, it's just been incredible. It's just, and by being with Arlene, I've, discussed women's studies to the, as much as one could possibly discuss women's studies through all these years, and it's so important. And I feel like it's more important even now. I watch the politics of the day, and I think this is just a miracle that we have women's studies.
So speaking of now, and thinking about having seen these multiple transitions, talking about the name change, so what's your hope for the future of this program? What would you like to see? What would you wish in it?
I just want it to go on. I want it to evolve and change and continue, because we need it. It's always going to be incredibly important. As they were talking about today, we go a little step forward and then we go backward a little bit. And I feel that in our culture and in the world. The world is scary. So I just want us to go on.
I want it to go on and thrive, and I think the certificate, the graduate certificate program is really important because I feel like it puts molds, it puts seeds, it puts whatever inside other disciplines, so that the students who come through and get trained as graduate students take that into the work that they do in their own discipline. And so I just sort of see it spreading like tentacles, into other disciplines. Though I cannot imagine a time when you wouldn't need women, gender, and sexuality
No, studies, no.
studies.
Well, thank you, y'all. It was really helpful. It was great to hear your story.
Yeah,
It was
thanks a
fun to
lot.
talk about it.